Your spiritual life feels like a test because something inside you has stopped accepting shallow answers. This is what spiritual awakening actually feels like before it looks peaceful. Higher consciousness doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with pressure. The moment you start seeing more, feeling more, and thinking deeper, life stops rewarding you the way it used to. If you felt emotionally stretched, mentally exhausted, quietly isolated, or like everything familiar suddenly stopped working, this phase isn't random. It's structured. And in this video, you're going to understand why this stage feels so intense, what it's training inside you, and how to move through it without losing yourself. This phase starts when your mind stops running on autopilot. You no longer accept things just because they're familiar. You begin noticing patterns instead of events. You see how the same emotional dynamics repeat in different situations. You notice how people react instead of listening. You notice how quickly others avoid discomfort. And once you see these things, you can't unsee them. Awareness doesn't come with an off switch. At first, this feels empowering. You feel sharper, more awake. But soon something strange happens. Relief doesn't arrive. Instead, life feels heavier. Your mind understands more, but your emotional system hasn't caught up yet. This gap creates tension. You see clearly, but you still feel deeply. And learning how to hold both at once is where the test begins. One of the biggest shocks during this stage is that effort stops producing predictable rewards. You do the right thing and still face resistance. You stay disciplined and still experience delays. You improve internally, yet externally things feel stuck or even unstable. This creates frustration because you are taught that effort equals outcome. But at this level, life stops rewarding effort and starts refining regulation. You're no longer being tested on how hard you try. You're being tested on how steady you remain when trying harder doesn't work. This is when emotional cushioning disappears. Distractions stop distracting. Entertainment feels empty faster. Validation doesn't land the same way. Even comfort routines lose their effect. You can no longer escape yourself, and that feels unsettling. But this isn't deprivation, it's containment. Your nervous system is learning how to stay present without numbing reality. That's why silence feels uncomfortable at first. When stimulation drops, internal noise rises. Thoughts get louder. Old memories surface. Old doubts replay. Unprocessed emotions come forward without warning. Many people mistake this for regression. It's not. Suppression has ended. Awareness has made space for everything that was pushed aside to finally be seen. This stage often feels chaotic because integration is messy. Like reorganizing a room, everything looks worse before it looks better. But nothing new can be built on top of unresolved layers. So they surface. Socially, this phase creates distance. Conversations that once felt normal start feeling repetitive or draining. Small talk feels heavy. Emotional games feel obvious. It's not that people changed, your perception did. Awareness makes patterns visible. You start noticing how often people speak to be validated, not understood. How often reactions replace reflection. This perception creates loneliness, not because you're superior, but because you're no longer distracted. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of the journey. People assume loneliness means something is wrong. In reality, solitude becomes necessary when your system recalibrates. Constant stimulation disrupts clarity. This phase teaches you how to be alone without feeling empty, and that skill becomes a foundation for emotional independence. Another layer of this test involves identity. The roles you once relied on begin to collapse. The fixer, the helper, the strong one, the one who always understands. These roles once kept you safe, connected, and valued. But now they feel heavy. Life begins placing you in situations where these identities no longer work. You help, but it's not appreciated. You explain, but you're misunderstood. You stay strong, but you're taken for granted. This isn't rejection. It's exposure. You're being shown the cost of living from performance instead of authenticity. Without these roles, you feel raw, undefined, uncertain. The mind wants to rebuild immediately, to grab a new label, a new purpose, a new structure. But rebuilding too fast only recreates the same patterns with different names. The test here is tolerance. Can you sit in not knowing without rushing to define yourself again? Emotionally, intensity increases. Feelings surface faster and linger longer. Anger appears without clear triggers. Sadness comes in waves. Fatigue settles deeper than physical tiredness. This doesn't mean you're weakening. It means sensitivity has increased. Awareness amplifies emotional signals. What was once muted now comes through clearly. This stage teaches emotional regulation, not suppression, not expression without control, but awareness without absorption. You learn how to feel without drowning. This skill takes time, and while it develops, emotions feel overwhelming. That overwhelm is temporary. Mentally, another shift happens. You stop interpreting everything as personal. Situations feel less like attacks and more like information. This neutrality can feel unsettling. You may wonder why you're less reactive, less emotionally invested. This isn't detachment, it's stabilization. Emotional charge decreases as understanding increases. Progress here becomes invisible. No external milestones, no applause, just subtle internal shifts. You pause before reacting. You disengage instead of escalating. You walk away without needing the last word. These moments don't look impressive, but they're transformational. Emotional mastery doesn't announce itself. It stabilizes quietly. This is also when repetition becomes undeniable. Same lesson, different situation. Same emotional trigger, new person. This repetition isn't bad luck. It's precision. Life repeats patterns until your response changes, not until circumstances change. Once your reaction shifts, calmer, clearer, less attached, the pattern dissolves. Control becomes another theme. You realize how little force works at this level. Pushing creates resistance. Chasing creates distance. Overthinking creates noise. The test becomes letting go without collapsing. Trusting without guarantees. Acting without gripping outcomes. This feels uncomfortable for a mind trained on certainty, but it builds resilience faster than success ever could. Confusion is part of the process. Old mental frameworks stop working. You can't logic your way forward using outdated maps. This confusion isn't failure. It's transition. Like switching operating systems, temporary lag before optimization. The test is patience, not passive waiting, but steady presence while clarity reorganizes itself. Time begins to feel strange. Progress feels slow. Days feel heavy. That's because internal change doesn't follow external timelines. Growth happens in layers, not leaps. Layers don't announce themselves. They settle quietly. One day you realize you no longer replay conversations. You no longer crave explanations. You no longer feel the urge to correct everyone. You no longer chase closure. That's advancement. Eventually, the question changes. You stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what is this shaping in me? That shift marks the transition from resistance to cooperation, from struggle to refinement, from confusion to clarity. This phase doesn't remove challenges. It changes your relationship to them. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of chase. You remain steady instead of defensive. This steadiness isn't numbness. It's alignment. And alignment feels quiet because it doesn't need validation. If your spiritual life feels like a test, it's because you're being prepared for stability that doesn't depend on circumstances. This phase isn't here to break you. It's here to make you internally unshakable. The next step isn't doing more, it's seeing more clearly. Paying attention to what drains you, respecting what steadies you, trusting calm even when it feels unfamiliar. If this connected with you, thank you for watching until the end. This path isn't loud, but it's powerful. Like and subscribe, and stay close to the clarity you're building.